This podcast is produced by Concierge Medicine Today, LLC. All rights reserved. Concierge Medicine Today, or CMT, was founded in 2007 and serves as the industry's trade publication and annual medical conference organizer. Please note, the information shared on this podcast and across all CMT platforms is intended for general informational purposes only and may contain errors or omissions. Nothing in this podcast nor across CMT platforms constitutes medical, financial, legal, nor professional advice, and CMT is not liable for any inaccuracies. CMT encourages listeners to conduct their own research and consult trusted advisors before taking any action based on the content presented. No mention, interview, or link should be considered an endorsement. This content is primarily intended for a healthcare audience and may not apply to all listeners. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, good morning or good evening, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have an old friend and a repeat guest, Katie Rhodes. And she is a CFO and really the founder of Coal Creek Ledgers. And we're going to talk about stuff related to accounting and finances in your practice. And I think nobody understands it better how doctor's office can track their profit and their cash flow, look at their numbers, because if you ignore your numbers, you're not going to be in business very long. Katie, thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
So briefly, for those that are new to Coal Creek Ledgers, new to Katie, who are you to them? Why should they listen and lean into what we're about to talk about today?
Yeah, so a little bit about us. Let's see. We've been in business for a few years now and started on the bookkeeping side with a heavy focus on serving those in membership medicine. And I've always loved, being able to help in that aspect. And even with the bookkeeping, we would try to look at things from a strategic point of view and be sure that our clients knew what they were looking at, right? You want to make sure that I never wanted to be someone that just spit these numbers at you and hopefully you know what to do with them and where to go from there, right? But more than just having that good information, helping them to know what these reports are really telling them. But over the last several months, I've been really excited to expand on that advisory side because there is a limit to what you can do whenever you're strategizing based on the numbers you see. And I could definitely show people what was going on, right? Like, this is what your numbers are telling you. This is the direction you're headed, and, make some suggestions and things. But there's a limit there. And I'm really excited about doing more of this fractional CFO advisory side because it gives me a bigger opportunity to help them go forwards towards the changes that they want to make in their business, with a really heavy focus on increasing your cash, because that's whether you like it or not, whether you like to talk about money, like this is how your business will grow. Or if you don't want to grow, this is how it will sustain enough so you can be out of the business more. Maybe you want to be the CEO and you want less office hours. Maybe you want, there's no end. And the answer is almost always the cash. So however I can help you grow that to understand what to do with this information, that's where my heart is. I just want to make sure that people know what to do with this information so they can go the direction that they want to.
Something comes to mind when you say that, and it is, I think, it kind of leans into our first question, which is, why do most business owners and doctors struggle and sometimes fail in business? And you can talk on the business side, but then parallel it over to the subscription and membership side and what you're seeing. Because I think a lot of doctors are so great at being a physician, but then the team relies on them to pay the bills and pay the paychecks. And maybe the doctor delegates some of those activities, but at the end of the day, he or she is going to decide where those dollars get spent. Are we going to buy new technology, invest in software as a service? Or are we going to, am I going to increase, what I pay my staff? And so oftentimes, and you can speak to this and riff on this a bit and give us some of your insights of what you're seeing out there, is that, by presuming that the physician should be in that financial decision-making role where they're determining, Every financial decision. Yes, with some guidance of maybe a practice administrator.
Mhm.
How are they putting a lid on their organization? So, again, talk to us a little bit about that and what do business owners struggle and doctors struggle with, and sometimes why are they failing? So,
All right. So, I mean, primarily, you know, the saying, cash is king, right? You can have a great membership panel set up. You can be making great profit, but that really doesn't tell you how much cash is flowing through your business. And cash is the primary reason where people struggle. They're not keeping an eye on um, that measurement of their business. And so, um, going back to keeping a consistent positive cash flow in your business is where it's at. And like you said, they might have some guidance from someone in their business, which is key. You need to make sure that you have good financial information that you're looking at, that you can trust it, right? Because this is how you're making decisions to keep your business alive. And whether it's someone like me or someone that just really knows their stuff in the numbers, you need someone to come alongside you that keep an eye on that and say, you know, figure out the return on investment. Are you going to actually make dollars based off of a decision that you make, something you purchase, a software or an employee you hire? Or maybe it's not a dollar return. Maybe you're gaining time, but whatever that is, someone needs to help you figure out that every dollar you put out gives something back to you. And I mean, that's really the basis of where we come at things. It can be that basic. Creating the forecasts and the strategies on what you're going to do to get there, that's a whole nother thing. But what it really boils down to is making sure that you've got more cash flowing in than you have going out, and that will help you to grow your practice. Or if you're not focused on growth, that's fine. But to get the money, the the cash goal to be able to do what you want to do with your business.
so I'm going to give you some homework for after. Maybe this will be for our next podcast, but it's about something that is a brain-based kind of business growth model. And it's there needs to be something, and there's something happening in all of our brains as individuals, even as physicians and business owners, whether you're listening or not. There's something in our brain called the mid-cingulate cortex, and it's a really small area in our brain that helps with the emotions and decision-making choices that we're making. And so when we experience pain or we need to make a really tough decision related to our business, the mid-cingulate cortex starts to get active, and it helps us figure out what to do next. And understanding that really unique part of our brain and why we're making decisions the way we are, we grow best when we have resistance and we have challenges. And we can't have one or the other, right? In order to build our
Mhm.
muscles, we got to have some resistance and there's got to be some challenges. And sometimes that creates some uncertainty. And physicians are well known for, you know, attempting to not make, because they're trained that way, to not make decisions, on the spur of the moment. And so they can get their practice and their business kind of, even I would say, neurologically stuck in maintenance mode or just stall
Right.
out versus go for growth. And so, what are you seeing out there, especially in the membership medicine economy of the physicians? Are you seeing that they're kind of stalling out, or the ones that are working well, what are they doing differently? Are they kind of, risk averse and stalled, or are they like, I understand this is going to be a challenge, but we need to do
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah. There tends to be two types of people, right? You've got business owners that they're feeling stuck, maybe. They're not hitting whatever they wanted to as far as either profit or having the cash that they wanted to, or whatever their goal was for the year, and they're just not getting there, and they just keep working harder in the business, and it's not providing the return that they want, but that's the only avenue that they see to improve. They just keep working harder, right? And then you have the type of person that they're able to step back and if they can't figure out, reach out to someone that can help them figure out what they need to change their situation. They can zoom out and see what do I need to change here to make my life better, to make my business better, and grow the piece of it that I'm trying to grow. So, I mean, I see it on both sides. Some in membership medicine, I see a lot of doctors that just have they just keep working harder. I keep coming back to that because that's what they've been trained to do. They know that, I mean, through residency and everything, they know how to work hard, that they know what to do there. But the ones that make time to look at their numbers and meet with someone who can walk through those numbers with them, they have an action plan. And I have clients that have told me, you know, I, whenever it comes up, they're like, no, I don't worry about this at night. I don't have to think about this because I know you've got this. And if something were wrong, you'd tell me, or, we have a plan to move forward. So really it's about that. You need to take the time to look and like you said, make, I forget the word that you used, but you're going to make a decision based off of real numbers. Whenever you start doing that for your business and not just doing it based off your intuition or how you feel that day or how it feels this month, you stop being the bottleneck and you can really make gains towards what you're reaching for.
So that kind of leans into a pesky question, and that is, I got that as a review years ago, and he wrote me an email back, and he's like, I hope that use of that word pesky didn't come across negative because you ask all the pesky questions we doctors want to know, and so
Okay.
I want to press on that, question real quick because I think that in healthcare especially because a lot of healthcare professionals and practitioners were not taught the business side of medicine. They do what they do and they do it really well. But all too quickly, when you think like, okay, well, there's two types of business owners or physician owners who run a business, small or large, and they either work harder and they keep their head down because they don't know what else to do, or there's the ones that can zoom out and step out and level up their practice by hiring for their weaknesses. Make the differentiation between those two financially, because I think all too quickly we can make the assumption that, well, those that work harder and just keep their head down, they don't have the money to stop. They don't have the money to zoom out. They don't have the money to hire for their weaknesses. And when in reality, what's your perspective? Is it no, they both don't, both of those types of individuals, those philosophies don't have the money, to zoom out.
Yeah.
One just approaches the problem differently than the other.
Okay. So I think a big difference there is being able to imagine a different future for themselves. Um, Usually it's a sacrifice of time. That's really hard for some of these doctors. Even the ones that zoom out, it is a sacrifice of their time to come apart and spend time on something administrative like this that maybe they don't fully understand it and they can't 100% visualize what this picture looks like, what their return looks like for having done it. But they kind of have a vision for what it could do. And they know, down inside that this is something that will help them to move forward. The ones that just keep working harder, you know, um, they just don't have time. They don't have time to look at it because maybe they're not making money or they're not making the profit they want to, and they it just they don't see how it could help them. Um, so yeah,
So
I
what's
think
your
it
advice for them when you work with those types? Because that's a mindset. That's a philosophy that you're like, dude, you gotta give me some time
it
so that
is.
you can have a vision of your future. Like, do you
Yeah.
want to keep doing this into your 80s? Do you, I look at, for example, a good example of who did this well. He was struggling. This physician that I know very, very well, he and I are first name basis, and I've known him for years, and he's just an amazing doctor, and he always has been. But he was financially struggling, and
Mhm.
he zoomed out and he said, yeah, it didn't take me even that long. I just built it into my schedule. And he went to some of the local, kind of almost got a master's degree type of thing,
Mhm.
but it wasn't an official master's degree. It was just he recognized his weakness and he was like, I need help. If I want to continue being a solo and have a part-time employee come in 3 times a week and maybe a nurse practitioner, 4 days a week and keep
Mhm.
working as hard as I'm working, then yeah, this I can make that work. It's not easy, but I want to, have relationships with my kids, and I want to, maybe expand what I'm doing to the local community because I have been here for so many years. And he did that. And now he's got different locations and different practitioners, that he's brought on. And he's like, I
That's
have a
amazing.
5 year plan now, I have a 10-year
Yes.
plan. And, did he have the time? Did he have the money? No, he didn't have either one of those. You
Yeah.
can welcome to riff on that a little bit.
No, I totally agree. It's very you can really compare it to like having a personal trainer. You said what can someone do who's in that situation? It's really a discipline, right? We know everyone tells us you need to work out a little bit, you need to have some sort of muscle tone to be healthy. We know that. And so if you are really struggling with that, it's recognizing that weakness and hiring someone to keep you accountable and give you a plan to move forward. Now, nobody's saying you really need to meet with your finance person and you need to make sure that you know where what the trajectory that you're on. Do you have a forecast set for your business? Um, that's not something that people are just saying, right? But it's coming to a point where you can recognize, like in your mindset, what could I gain? What's the potential here if I focus on this for a while? And then in your mind, if you see it as something worthy, then just doing the thing, right? Getting someone to hold you accountable and making time for those important things so you can turn your situation around.
And it requires of every doctor the same thing that we all hate, which is meetings.
Yes.
Not like a ton of meetings with a taking up a bunch of your time that's like that, as my daughter says, that could have been an email.
Yes.
It's one of those things that you have to purposely work on your business, not just in your business. Our guest today is Katie Rhodes. She's with Coal Creek Ledgers. You can go to coalcreekledgers.com. And our next question for you is pretty basic, but I think it's an important one. That is, what's the difference between revenue, profit, and cash flow?
Yeah. So, a lot of people know what revenue and profit are. Revenue, this is what you're billing people, this is what you're bringing in on that top line, as they say, before anything else happens in your business. Profit is what you're left with at the end of the day. A lot of people really know how to read that P&L and they're looking at either the top number, like, wow, look what I did, and not really paying attention to their net income, their profit at the bottom. Or they do look at that profit at the bottom and they're like, after expenses and everything, cool, I made a profit. This is a good thing. I'm safe. But then not everyone keeps an eye on the cash flow, which, like I said, that's really how you can grow a business or reach whatever you're reaching for. Because even if you make a profit, things come out after that point. That doesn't show if you pay yourself through an owner withdrawal, if you have debt to pay down, um, those sort of things. And usually there's some sort of loan or at the very least student loans or something like that, right, to pay off. And so at the end of the day, after your profit, how much cash are you really left with? So that's the number one way to keep an eye on your business and make sure if you have a consistent positive cash flow, I mean, possibilities are endless, right?
And a lot of doctors don't like to think about, you know, the money side of things. They don't like to think about making money in their practice. And, I'm of the persuasion, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody said it much more eloquently than I did, and I'm about to say, and that is, yes, there are some businesses that make money, right? Whether it's in healthcare or in the business world. And sometimes they do bad things. Sometimes it's the negative, right? But more often than not, physicians are who are making a little bit extra on that bottom line are investing it into their practice, investing it into their team. If you've ever met a physician, which you and I have on a daily basis, then we know that they're like the salt of the earth. I mean, they're some of the best individuals on the planet and some of the smartest too.
Yeah.
And you know, to the idea of I was talking with a doctor in Texas, and he's like, I don't care, whatever, even if it's a bad year and it's in the negative, I give myself a $5 raise minimum. He's like, I need to know that this thing I'm working on is worth it. And, $5 isn't going to go very far these days. But you're welcome to, add to that idea of, are doctors too hard on themselves? Are they just saying, are they investing those extra dollars into the practice? And the ones that are struggling, the seven signs of insideritis, number six is ignoring your numbers or manipulating your numbers and thinking, well, hey, it's working, and when in
Yeah.
reality, maybe it's not.
Yeah. No, I think and what you said about giving yourself a raise, I mean, that's huge. And hopefully it's a whole lot more than $5 that you can afford to do, right? But a business can keep going without making a profit. I mean, Amazon proved that, right? It was years before they made a profit, but they had the cash flow to keep it going. And like you said, if they want to reinvest in the business, same idea. Maybe they don't have that profit happening because they're reinvesting, but it's important that you know where that part stops and you start being profitable. Like, do you have a plan for that? Are you going to exist this way and keep pushing cash into the business to grow it for 2 years, 3 years? Do you have the cash runway to do that? And what's your goal date to start being profitable and turning things around so that it's not just a side hustle, it's not a hobby. This is a business that makes money for a purpose.
So that my mind just keeps spinning. Because I'm an overthinker.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you hear often is kind of a leadership axiom and it's not good advice. It's not good business advice, especially from the accounting side, is, well, I'm really enthusiastic about this business or this practice model. And so I'm just going to take a risk. I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to send a letter about how difficult healthcare is. I'm going to send it to all my patients and I'm going to create a brochure and I'll maybe get a website and hopefully it'll be okay and hopefully I'll have patients on day one or at the end of the 30-day period. And so they just take the leap versus, like you said, build that runway. And eventually, that runway does come to an end, but at least you've kind of got a runway to like, okay, I've got cash flow for the next 6 months.
Hmm.
So, what are you seeing out there? Are you seeing some doctors take unnecessary risks? Are you especially in the direct primary care space? Are you seeing what are they doing? What are other doctors doing well that you're working with? Kind of give us some two pro tips and two
Yeah.
missteps.
I don't see, at least in my personal interactions, right? I haven't seen too many just jump without thinking. I feel like maybe that's why I kind of like working with this group of people. Maybe we're a little bit more risk averse. I like to analyze things, right? And so a lot of them do try to study out what this is going to do for them. Um, Maybe they don't know all the right numbers to look at, but they're at least thinking about it, right? But I know I have a client physician that you know, they did have to jump. It was a big move, but they had a plan. They knew what they had to work with financially. And if you want to say it this way, like human capital wise, what they could stretch themselves to do. And So they had to jump. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but they knew what they were working with. They knew the tools and dollars they had available to them. So yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's great. All right, our next question for Katie Rhodes. She's the CFO at Coal Creek Ledgers. You can go to coalcreekledgers.com. We'll put the links in the show notes as well, as a PDF download that she's provided for us. But the next question for you, Katie, is what's the only thing you need to stay in business?
Cash, baby. Cash is king, right? You
Yeah.
like we said, you just keep, even if you're not profitable, as long as you have a plan to get there, if you have the cash, you can stay in business until you get to the point where you're a healthy, thriving business.
And of the ones that you've seen over your experience in working with doctors' offices, what makes you kind of wince like, oh, I would not do that? And I'm sure you tell them that because you're an honest person and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good idea. And they kind of push you on it.
Yeah. That's a good question. Thinking. Um,
Well, as you're thinking about that, I'll give you
yeah.
a couple of my experiences. One of them is, well, this is a really good idea. I'm going to do this. It's pretty much just going to be me and a part-timer, and I'll have somebody answer the phones. And I've got a really good website, but I'm going to dip into my 401k, or I'm going to dip into my savings for this, or maybe they're making decisions too fast, and
Yeah.
then we kind of get into, we'll go into it. That's another question for another day. But, what's your thoughts? What have you seen that kind of just makes you like, oh, that's not a good decision?
Yeah. I feel like it's um an easier, if you want to say like a knee-jerk reaction to add staff without really putting a plan into what they're going to add to your practice. If you are stressed to the max, everyone's working, you don't know what else to do, it's easier to just say, well, adding a person is going to solve this. So we'll add another person. And, you know, sometimes that's done without a very detailed plan in place about what they're going to be removing from everyone's plate, and is this going to give you a return, or what the return that you have in your head. um, Another one is, maybe adding a service through an expensive piece of equipment and really stretching yourself maybe farther than you have the cash to stretch yourself to. But you're like, oh, if I add this service, it's going to add so many more patients, that they're going to come in for this. Well, have you researched the market? Does anybody know what this thing does? All of those sorts of things. And then extrapolating from there, creating a forecast like, if you do this, knowing what you know, gathering some more information. This is how many dollars it could add. How long is it going to take you to recoup the investment you've put into this? Those are the sorts of things that maybe everyone doesn't think through before they do this, but it's important. We're affecting the return and the cash that you have to work with.
Of the business owners and practice administrators, healthcare folks, because sometimes you're like, I just need to talk to you, but you brought in this other person, and now that the communication relational dynamic is already awkward as it is.
This is a reminder.
Sorry about that. Um, we love technology; it's all around us, um, but it's one of those things where you could just kind of think about like, oh, I wish like I just need to talk to you and I don't need the relational communication dynamic to be interfered because he or she is steering you in a different direction.
Mhm.
And I think that we start to see a lot of doctors, if you were to think about 10 doctors, how many of them, and it doesn't have to be in the membership and subscription space, can be any client, right? But mostly related to healthcare. Of those, what I'm hearing in this conversation is those that are going to succeed need to have a vision of the future, of where they want to be, whether it's 3 years and 10 years. Of 10 doctors,
100%.
that you talk to sales, you talk to them about sales and you're like, hey, they're just a prospective client. They haven't even signed on. How many of those out of 10 in the healthcare space that you have talked to, work with, not working with would say they have a clear vision versus, yeah, the majority just don't. They're just too in the weeds.
I mean, if we're talking percentages, maybe maybe like 2% out of 10, right?
Yeah.
It's and it's not that they don't have a goal. Everyone says, well, I'd like to make 1 million by 2027, or I'd like to, only work 20 hours a week. But no one's drilling down on them with these. Somebody hears that and they're like, okay, cool, that's a great goal. But what's the dollar amount you need to work 20 hours a week? And at what stages do you need to hit that so that you can work 20 hours a week in 2 years? You know, who you need to have that goal, but then have someone or yourself put pen to paper, work backwards from that goal and see where you need to go. So people have goals, yes, but really specific goals for your cash, for your revenue and your profit, and whether you like to talk about money or not, those are the ones that are going to get you either to 1 million or 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
yeah,
and so go ahead.
no, that's that's how you're going to get to those goals. Cash answers that. So
Well, and it's such I love the visual of taking a $1 bill and then cutting it into different slices. You've seen that probably graphic before. And it's like, here's where this part of every dollar goes to. Here's where this part of every dollar goes to in this business.
mhm.
And that's so important to know where your dollars are going. And oftentimes you're right. A lot of medical offices in particular are, they're hiring, assuming that, okay, here's your job responsibilities. Now go do it, and then, you've been hired maybe for this, but then, oh, by the way, I need you to do this. And then job evaluations come in 6 months, 3 months, a year, and it's like, so how did you do on what you were actually hired to do? And you're like, well, I didn't have any time to do any of those things
Yeah.
because you kept giving me these other things. And you know, like we were talking about off air a little bit about, I had a issue, with the front office at a doctor's office I go to. And very rarely do we get a call back that says, "Oh, you overpaid and we're going to refund your money back to you. Would you like to come by and pick it up, or would you like us to send you a check?" That just rarely, if ever, happens out there in the healthcare marketplace, which is why so many patients are getting burned out. And I will say this for those that are enjoying this conversation, and hopefully it's starting to get you thinking about your numbers and not why you should never ignore your numbers. But I think that the path to I think it was Jeff Henderson, he said, the path to your dream job often leads through your day job. And there's nothing wrong. Like, you're not a failure if you're working part-time while you're trying to start this other business. And at the same
Absolutely.
time, we need you as patients. We need you to show up, and we need you to be faithful where you are, because the source is what has weight. And my physician is probably one of the top 5 most influential voices behind my wife and kids in my life. And so your words as my doctor weigh 1,000 pounds. And all too often, you might not know about what's happening in the front office. You might not know about, he or she at the front office is going to give you bad news, but they know when, believe me, they know when to give you good news versus bad news, because somewhat selfishly, they know that if they give you bad news about your numbers, that it's going to impact their job too. And so we just say all of that to say that if you serve people and your patients exceedingly well, good things will eventually happen, and that you've done hard stuff before. Looking at your numbers, hiring for your weakness, because there are areas that you are and I are both weak at. And, I will never be a doctor. I will never pretend I was like, that's very affirming because Michael's a marketing major from a party school. It's like, that's a good thing. So nonetheless,
Yeah.
you're welcome to add to that, your thoughts on that before we jump into the fourth of our questions.
No, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's just it, you have to focus on those things. And like you said, you had that bad experience, and maybe you want, I just kind of had this thought while you're talking about that. If you're working with someone and you're like, well, we want to increase, the satisfaction of the patients that walk through our door. And well, I don't really know how that's going to benefit the numbers, and I don't know how looking at the numbers is going to help there, but that's something we want to do. Well, there are 16 different drivers or levers you can pull to change your revenue, your profit, or your cash. And one of those is your retention rate. That would funnel down to measuring that. So it's I guess my CFO brain is just working here as you're talking. Like if you want to measure and see how you're making your patients happier, that's something you can measure. You can measure that in the numbers, and that's a number you can look at to see where you're going with it. So,
Okay. I love that concept of measurement because a leadership principle in business, which is often not recited back or repeated in healthcare, is what gets measured gets repeated. But I think that
absolutely.
sometimes in healthcare, we're so busy and so assuming that, well, the last two patients that left today, they were happy. So everybody's happy. And
Yeah.
that's the assumption, you know. So and I think that Google reviews is not necessarily, or your health grades reviews, they're not necessarily, nothing against those. They're just maybe not necessarily the barometer.
Hmm.
That's not maybe where we should be going. And we shouldn't be assuming that, well, the front office staff told me that pretty much all 3 days this week, Monday through Wednesday, we've had happy patients. And yeah, we got a one grumpy one. His name is Mike, and he comes in, I don't know, once a quarter. And
Right.
so we don't, we just assume everybody's good. But where should we be measuring and how should we be measuring? And, where are the incorrect sources of measurement versus the lever that is a good source of measurement?
Oh, that's a big question because every practice is different, right? I mean, what your audience typically has in common is you have this membership model, and then you have some individual services and you have insurance and all of that. But everyone operates very differently. Um, at the very core of retention, you want to see who's leaving, right? And why they're leaving. Are they just moving away? Or did something happen and maybe they didn't want to say, or they did actually complain and say, this is what happened? Or, a lot of people have like customer satisfaction surveys. Who's actually happy enough that they want to fill that out? And how many are going unanswered? I mean, there's a ton of different ways you could measure that. And here's the naughty word, meeting, right? In your meeting with this person who's figuring this out with you, this is where you would talk about that. Talk about the patient journey before they get to your office, when they walk through the door, as you see them, and then after they leave. Throughout that patient journey, what are the things that we could measure to see, are they happy with what they're doing with us? So it can be very specific. And that's like I said, at the core basis, who's staying with you, right?
Yeah. We talk a lot about the theater of the patient journey, right? The theater of your practice right now, there is a play going on, and there are roles that your staff and you are playing. Yes, you may be a central character, but you're not the only character in that theater. And some church marketing folks will say the sermon starts in the parking lot. And in healthcare, like your message of health and well-being starts when I Google you or I start to
Yeah.
do my research about who's a doctor in my area in that specialty or, these types of things. And I go to your website and I look at your Facebook page or your Instagram and then all these other things. And that message of health and well-being, if you haven't been on posting for 3 months, that informs me as a prospective patient. Well, I wonder how fast they are at returning phone calls.
Right.
And insideritis is, I think, something that you have to deal with in your job. And if you're not familiar with what insideritis is kind of this cancer inside of healthcare that I just loathe, because I think that what it does is it tells us and informs all of us that by focusing on insider issues over outsider issues, that's what insideritis is. It says, well, Katie, Michael, you guys have all you've talked about some really good things. You brought up some good points, but that's not how we do it here. Or my favorite, those are good ideas, but I don't have time to be measuring and having more meetings. I already have enough. And
Right.
if we continue to want that permission slip, to that hall pass to say, you know what, I'm just going to, I don't need to do some of those things. I'll do a couple of those things. And that's a good start, but that's not making a difference where we are. And I think that we need to start, especially in healthcare, in the patient journey, to make it better and take it personally.
Hmm.
Make it better, take it personal. And everybody on your team and your staff should have that mindset of, yeah, how can I make it better? I am here to be the phone caller. I'm here to do pre-authorizations. I'm here to, take the urine or the blood draws, and I'm here to be the doctor. Like, they're showing up and they're doing what they're doing best. And measurement just based on the last couple of people who walked in the door or on the last 4 Google reviews or Healthgrades reviews, that's not enough. And I can tell you that because I am a pretty high needs patient and I have high expectations. And trust me, I have lowered my expectations of doctors to the point where it's like, Canada is looking pretty good right now, as compared to, yeah, we have a great healthcare system here in the US, but that's a conversation we'll have on another day. But our next question relates to, I love what you said about the 16 different levers. Um, Talk about maybe more about those levers. And I think that that's also included maybe in the show notes as well. But talk to us a little bit about some of those levers that they can pull that you are like, this is something we always pull. We always pull this lever.
Yeah. Um, okay. So some of them that you want to look at, right? And like you said, there will be a link, drivers.coalcreekledgers.com, where you can have this and use these. And like I said, there's 16, but as you said, you don't have to implement everything all at once. You may have experienced that corporately or like in a hospital system where they come down and they just say, tomorrow we are flipping the switch. Everybody's doing this 100%. Well, we don't have teams of thousands. Okay. We're just talking about our own practices that we're trying to grow here. So don't overwhelm yourself. Pick a couple, as many as you think that are realistic and reasonable for you, and work on those. And then you can add to it. Right. But, yeah, some of the top ones you want to look at are retention rate. We, as a membership practice, you have a monthly recurring revenue. That's a huge part of what makes your business alive. And so you definitely want to keep an eye on that. Your average transaction value is another one. How much are you charging each month? How much are you charging for everything that you provide for this person? And is it enough to, whenever you boil it down to one membership, is it enough? Um, and let's see, what's another one? Payroll is huge, obviously. We already kind of touched on that. Uh, Days sales outstanding. Are you collecting this money up front? Are you giving people 30 days and really only bugging them when they aren't paying you at 45 or 60? What does that look like to keep your cash alive? So there's a
Mm.
there's a few that you could look at.
I love that there's 16. I mean, even though that's probably, a lot of physicians, if you were to think about, like, well, how do I improve my practice? How do I financially remain solvent? So I'm here in a year making an impact in my local community. I'm
Mhm.
encouraged that, that there's this list of 16 different levers that, could be really great. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
that gives me options. And, somebody much wiser and years ago said, money can't buy you happiness, But what it does is it does give you options, and options are a good thing. So when we need to go buy a car, we need to invest in software as a service, we need options because it's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, there's four different great softwares that we could use to implement in our practice to do this task. And so I would also say this too that I've seen on the side of these practices is, help your team stay in their lane. Like help them stay motivated and inspired into what they were hired to do. Don't just, we a lot of doctors' offices as business owners, they think in terms of function. And
Mhm.
patients don't think that way at all. They think in terms of feeling. How did this place make me feel? And when you become memorable and you become, you get small and personal, you become memorable. And when you become memorable, that memory is now portable and I will start telling people about it, right? And yeah, I probably won't tell everybody about it. We wish it would be the more 311 rule or the 711 rule. I'll tell seven people about how good you are versus I'll tell 11 people about how awful that was. I
Yeah.
wish it was flipped too, but unfortunately, that's just not how our brains work.
Mhm.
So our next question for you is related to um, how to set targets for revenue, profit, and cash flow. What are the 5 steps that you would advise doctors on?
Yeah. So, I mean, first we kind of want to talk about like why are we setting these? Why does it matter? And I mean, we've touched on that a lot, I feel like so far, but if you want to increase your revenue or your profit or your cash flow, just focus on four things. You have to generate more cash than you spend, right? And then you set targets, and then we'll talk about five, just five easy steps on how to do that. Generate more cash than you spend, set targets, keep score. Don't just say, okay, we're going to hit this goal and not know where you stand. You have to keep the score. And then create an action plan to know this week, this month, what am I going to do to move the needle on this one? And setting targets comes back to those 16 drivers. Like I said, it's all out there in a list. You can look at it and maybe inspiration will strike when you're looking and be like, okay, that one hits home. I feel like we have a problem there. I'm going to start measuring that one first. Um, so use those 16 drivers and find out what you did last year for them. Whichever one you're going to measure, if you're going to do all 16, great. Figure out what you did last year for those and then create realistic targets for this year based off of that. Step 3, add up those targets to come up with your profit and cash flow target for the year. You can add those up and then you have a number. This is what, based on what I said on each of these individual things, this is where I'm going to end up with profit and cash flow. Look at that number. Step number 4, you're just looking at it. Do I like it? Is that where I wanted to end up? And then step 5 is if you're done, if you like it, then you're great. You can end. But if not, you can go backwards and figure out which one of those 16 you need to change to make that target something that you like and somewhere you want to end up. So that was kind of throwing a lot at you, but I feel like if you break it down, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Just do one step at a time and you can make a difference. This is an actionable way to make a positive difference in your business to keep it
Yeah.
growing in the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, I it would be great to be able to walk away from this and say, okay, staff or this staff member, I want all of these 14 numbers tomorrow, right? And that's just
Right.
not going to happen. So,
And I
take
mean,
your time. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that maybe in the course of doing this, you realize you don't have the data to measure that. Like we were just talking about the retention rate, right? So to move forward, you need to make sure you have a financial system in place or you're at least willing to adopt one. You're willing to make those changes that, okay, I need this number, and then work even farther backwards from that. How am I going to get that? Where does that
Yeah.
information come from? So,
And it's it's always an awkward conversation to talk about with any healthcare business owner, physician or not, or practice administrator, because money is, and I think that mindset is changing where it's, oh, we have to talk about this. I remember years ago, I had all these, fresh out of college ideas about how I was going to change the world and all these nonprofit things that we should do and all these business ideas we should do. And then one of my mentors, she put a pause and she's like, "Those are all great ideas, but you know what you need in order to do to do those things and to change, change the community, change the world. I'll let you take a wild guess.
Money.
You gotta have money." Exactly. So she's
Right?
like, stay in your lane and show up and do your work, And I was
Yeah.
grateful for that because it taught so much of an important life lesson that yes, we are going to have great ideas. And then maybe it's a no for now, but not forever, kind of idea. And I think that we as who work in healthcare and toil and push that boulder up the mountain in healthcare each and every day, we can get lost in the altruistic mindset of, well, I'm here to make a difference and I'm here to make no money. And I'm here to
Mhm.
wear that like it's a badge of honor because that's what I was taught. And um, that's just that's just how we should do things.
Yeah.
And I think that if you really want to make a difference in this world, you need to have some options. And like my doctor, he recognized that he was struggling. He knew that there are some levers I need to pull. And I don't even know what levers those are, he said. But, he's working with individuals like yourself and others who are like, okay, here's the levers you can pull. And then he recently just shared with me the other day, he's like, I have a board of advisors. Like, if Coca-Cola or Home Depot or Delta Airlines or whoever it might be, Marriott, whatever, like just because they work out in the business space and they're not in the healthcare space, do you think that, you know, having a board of advisors is not okay as an individual? Like your spouse probably can see some of your blind spots. They're probably the one that can tell you like it is because you're going to actually listen to them, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe it probably shouldn't be your staff because they're going to tell you what they want you to hear. But maybe it's somebody who knows you best. And I will say this too, that the colleague that you're taking business advice from, we hear this from doctors all the time, that I wish I wouldn't have taken as much advice from the clinicians and my colleagues because I recognize in hindsight now that they got the same amount of business credit hours that I did. And they're
Yeah.
still making some of those bad decisions. And, if I want to be like them, and continue down my journey and not really have a lot of change and impact my local community of patients. And maybe I have an idea that's a no for now, but not forever. But I've been thinking about it for a while and I can't wait to do this. And, one physician, he flies out to, island that doesn't have any cars or roads or anything like that. And he does free care out there, and he's like, I fly out there, but I had to get a pilot's license and I have to have money in order to take time away from my practice to be able to do that, right? And know
Right.
that my patients are going to be taken care of while I'm gone for, 8 weeks at a time, or I'm sorry, 8 weeks a year rather.
Yeah.
So our final,
Absolutely.
go ahead if you want to say anything related to all of that before we wrap up.
No, it's all good. I was just gonna say I mean I can kind of identify with that. I'm a Christian and a lot of people in the faith, they're like, oh well, money's a bad thing. You shouldn't have any money because but how are you, it is a way that you can do good in the world. And think of all the giving you can do and the different ways you can help people, random acts of kindness whenever you're not stressing about feeding your family over the dollars that you make. So, no,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I know this maybe this area or this topic is not necessarily your area of expertise related to valuations, but as you continue to work in this field, we're starting to see more and more doctors kind of who are older and they're more seasoned in their years, and they're looking at, preparing their practice for sale. And what is the first thing that comes to mind related to, valuations and getting my practice ready for sale is, I'll let you answer.
Okay, getting it ready for sale. Um, Taking a look at the prospective income that they have, which obviously membership model is ideal for that. There's not a question of how many people I'll see next month. You have a pretty good idea of most of your revenue. So that's a big deal. That's really good. But yeah, just the overall financial health. Again, it's not just about the profit. Profit being profitable is important, but how much cash do you have available to your business? The overall health holistically. We're not just going to look at one number, right? Um, I don't know if that totally answered your question, but it's
No, it absolutely does. I mean, yeah, you're a nice person. I'm a nice person, but I want to buy your business. And what's the first thing that I'm going to be looking at? I'm going to look at your financial reports, right?
oh yeah,
And yeah, you're a nice person, but I'm not buying you. I'm buying, your practice and your business. And I want to know that if I'm investing and buying in this business, that it's going to be around in a year, right? Or because I may put a new doctor in there. And how long are you going to be there? And the term and termination languages and all
right.
these types of things. And what's the attrition that I can expect if I was to buy this type of practice? Like, how often are you seeing these patients? How are you measuring their retention? And
Mhm.
it does take time. It does take meetings. It does take, I encourage physicians, if you're not already doing this, and very few are, and I think that you would echo this as well in the conversations you probably have with these healthcare administrators and doctors is look outside of healthcare. Like start reading and absorbing and taking classes and, you know,
I like
building a,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Building an advisory board that can help you see your blind spots. I've always been, and you may or may not remember this. And I talked with somebody the other day. It was about the three types of friendships that you need to have in your life. And that is, it was given to me when I was in high school. And then I don't know if you ever heard of or remember the Seven Promises of a Promise Keeper book. It was an old book from the 90s. And I think it's been rewritten, revised a couple times, but it talked about at these huge, huge conferences, you want to have three types of friends in your life, a Paul, a Peter, and a Timothy. And you could call them, Jane, Joe, and
Yeah.
Josephine, I don't, whatever. But somebody that you look up to, right? And then somebody that's your equal, and then someone that you're kind of that looks up to you.
Hmm.
And having those types of individuals, in your life gives it gives relational interest, intrigue, into, yeah, I'm meeting with so and so today, and we're gonna have coffee, and they're pouring into my life, and I'm asking them the difficult questions about how to grow a practice, and what things should I be looking at on my measurements, and what levers should I be pulling, and maybe they have different levers that they're pulling that they would advise you to, and you're like, no, I don't think you need to pull on that lever yet. You need to pull on these three levers,
Sure.
and that is such an important, I think, concept that, we all can learn from, whether it's in our personal life or in our professional life. Um, okay, our last couple of questions for you. The book you recommend most or that you give away most when you talk to your clients, prospective clients. I'll let you think about that for a minute.
Well, I know the answer, and I probably said it the last time we met, but it's still my top. Unreasonable hospitality. You just talked about looking outside of healthcare to get ideas and figure out how to grow your business that way. Unreasonable hospitality really looks at the food service, upscale restaurants, and one of the men behind it, and all the things they did to give unreasonable hospitality to their customers. So it was definitely inspirational for me as a service provider, and I think it translates very well to healthcare.
Well, I'm going to throw one other one in there because I think you'll enjoy this too when you jump off, and that is the comeback effect. And the comeback effect by Jason Young talks about mega church marketing. And I know that's somewhat like, what? Like, really? When did this become some Christian podcast? That's not what it's about. I remember talking with a physician, and she invited me to come visit her practice. And she knew she had been to our conferences, the Concierge Medicine Forum and others, and and she's like, I did, what did you, she showed me this one particular room, and it happened to be the bathroom. And I was like, and I looked in there and I closed the door and kind of was in there by myself and kind of walked back out. And she's like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, probably the best bathroom I've ever seen. And I was like, and she's like, "Did you look at the toilet paper?" And I was like, "Yes, it's not the cheapest. It's you care about your patients, right?" Like,
And
and she's like, "Yeah." And I had the QR code on. It's like the QR code on the back of the door was awesome because it told me that I needed I have homework. Like I need to
yeah,
take care of myself, or you're giving me a free PDF and I can leave a review and all these types of things, right? And when you get small and personal, you become memorable. And, whether it's the softness of, you think that this stuff doesn't matter, but believe it or not, like, let's say you go to a Catholic church or Christian church, whatever it might be. And, inevitably, maybe it moved you to tears, right? Nothing's worse than picking up a tissue that's like sandpaper, right? And you're like, no,
right.
that stuff matters, right? Like
Yeah.
now you might not be able to afford, we are in a toilet paper transition in our house. And my wife was, like, let's try this brand. And it was like, oh man, that one costs so much more, And I know that
Yeah.
this is kind of taking a weird left turn, but this stuff matters to patients. They pay attention to how you serve them. An interior designer that we spoke with, her name is Mitra. She said, okay, you can go fill your lobby with a bunch of dining room chairs. And you can cater to family members and you can cater to, and you can just put general chairs. You might as well just put folding chairs. And because what are you going to do with the table, right? It's just going to sit in storage or maybe somebody's garage because you're not going to use it. You're just filling your lobby with stuff in order to seat people. I remember walking into a doctor's office and seeing all of these dining room chairs. And I was like, where's the table that goes with this? And like, well, I talked to the doctor and he's like, I wanted to cater to more family because we have more people waiting now. And I was like, well, you know what that tells me? And he's like, oh, great. You're the concierge medicine guy. I was like, yeah, well, that tells me that you're not going to have time for me anymore and that you're going to take on more patients. And while I want that for you, because I recognize that money is important and that you
Sure.
need to grow, consider putting those two really comfy leather chairs back in your lobby. You can keep four dining room chairs. I don't care what you do with them, but put those two leather chairs back. And so about a month later, he put the two leather chairs back, probably not at my advice, but maybe at other people's advice. And remember, Mitra said, the interior designer, she said, yeah, maybe that leather chair cost $1,000. And dining room chairs are not cheap either. I mean, maybe you're looking at 150 if you get a really good bargain. But let's say
Sure.
you just put in regular waiting room chairs. They're probably $300-$400, right? Office furniture is expensive nowadays. The difference between those two, and again, the sermon starts in the parking lot. As soon as I walk in, what chair am I going to go sit in? I'm going to go sit in the one that makes me feel like $1,000,000 because that is where the message of health and wellness and healing and recovery, whatever it might be, that's where it starts too. And you're giving me that feeling that, you know what? They care about me here. And why are we making the idea of coming and visiting our doctor's office any less appealing than inviting a good friend into our home for, a chat around the kitchen island, or a chat in our living room? We're not preparing enough. And when you start measuring these things and doing these things and pulling all these levers, and we'll put the links to the show notes of how to download that 16 lever PDF and these drivers in the show notes below. Our guest today has been Katie Rhodes of Coal Creek Ledgers. Please reach out to her. She is just a good spirit. Again, this is not sponsored, not endorsed. It's just we believe that this content, this information is important, and Katie's been gracious with her time. Our final question for you, Katie, is Katie, what do you want to be known for?
What do I want to be known for? I remember you asked me this the last time I was on, and I think my answer is very similar. Still, I want to, I want your life to be better for having known me. I want to be a spot of joy in your day. I don't want to be the person that you look at whenever the caller ID shows up and you groan. That is not my desire. So I hope I can be a spot of joy for the people that I interact with in this life.
That's awesome. Well, Katie, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your valuable expertise and your valuable insights about the practice of medicine, specifically about the financial side of your practice and making it just a little bit better. So thank you for your time today, Katie. We'll catch you very soon.
Thank you for having me.